بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه. Inshallah, we will pick up in the middle of issue 1, which we began in the last lecture, but we didn't have time to do. So, picking up on that, we are going to talk about the tawatur hadith, the hadith that is transmitted, what is translated by Dr. Sherman Jackson as diffuse congruence, which is a very elegant translation because that's exactly what tawatur means. It means it's diffusely spread out, and it's congruent, and all of the people are saying the same thing. So the tawatur narration is the highest narration that we have in our science of narration. All of the verses of the Quran are mutawatir, and there are some hadith, maybe 100, 150 hadith that are mutawatir. So he's going to begin by talking about that, and what are the conditions for that? What is the definition of that? What is the conditions for that? What is the number of people required for that? Because obviously there's a difference of opinion. And then therefore, what kind of knowledge do we gain from the mutawatir text? So if I have a text in front of me that is narrated by diffuse congruence, I want to know what kind of obviously it's sound knowledge and it's necessary knowledge. As opposed to that is the ahad, the singularly narrated hadith. So he's going to juxtapose the tawatur hadith with the ahad hadith and do the same thing. Talk about what this definition is, what its conditions are, how many people are required to narrate that, and then therefore what kind of knowledge do we gain from the ahad transmission. And of course, based on what I just said, most of the hadith are ahad or are less than mutawatir, let's say. So therefore that's an issue that needs to be discussed. Can we build our sharia, our function, our belief, etc. on the ahad traditions, yes or no? And then following that, we will do issue 2, which is very short. We will talk about the knowledge that is gained. Okay, so the knowledge that is gained from the ahad transmission is dealt with in issue 2, and how we will use the ahad hadith in issues of fatwa and testimony, which is what concerns us most in the science of Usul al Fiqh. And then there are some applications of the ahad hadith as it comes to dunya related things and religious related things that we'll also mention. Those are the main topics. I'll see you back here for the next clip, inshallah. So the last thing I said in the previous clip was knowledge gained from the diffuse congruent narration is necessary. And I've been using the example of like a country like Australia or New Zealand, which I've never been to, but it's a necessary knowledge that I have that such a place exists, that there is a part of the world called Australia and New Zealand, and it's the way that the globe is, it's in the southern hemisphere, it's in the Pacific region, so on and so forth. So that's a necessary type of knowledge. ثم إن أخبروا عن محسوس لهم فذاك وإلا كفى ذاك وإلا كفى ذلك وإن علمه لكثرة العدد متفق وللقرائن قد يختلف. Now, these people that we're talking about, this theoretical group of people that are narrating, if they report on something they saw, it is diffuse congruence. Or if not, then those who saw it, enough to render the report diffuse congruent. So, there was a storm last night, and there were 50 people at a dinner party. 20 of those people were in another room that had no windows. They were in the basement, for example. 30 people witnessed the rain. Those 30 people, since they are above 5 and above, number-wise, then those 30 people are enough for us to say that the report of that phenomena is mutawatir. And we don't have to worry about the other people that were in the basement that didn't see it. Now, of course, it's at the same location, the same event, which is the dinner party, so the 30 are going to tell the 20. I'm making up an example. It might not be the cleanest example. I apologize. But just go with it. Let's just say as the 20 came up from the basement, the rain stopped. The 30 are informing the 20. So now those 20, the next day will go and say and report about the rain. But they actually didn't see it. But they heard it from those, and those that they heard it from are enough to be of the level of mutawatir. I hope that makes sense. Let me read that line again with that example in mind. If they report on something they saw, it is diffuse congruence. Or if not, then those who saw it is enough to render the report diffuse congruence. And then he continues, the correct opinion is that the knowledge gained from a diffuse congruent report is equal to all those narrating, and the conditions must be part of the narration, since it is impossible that different narrators understood different things. Since it is possible, afwan, that different narrators understood different things. So, it rained and there was thunder. So the meta issue is that it rained. It was a storm, a rainstorm, a summer rainstorm, let's say. And there's a condition or a description that it thundered. The people that narrated it, the 30 people that were upstairs that saw the rain and the thunderstorm, forget about the 20 people in the basement, they are going to narrate the meta issue, which is that there was a rainstorm, a summer rainstorm, and they are also going to add to that the condition or add to that the description that there was thunder and lightning, that is. So he says, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. I lost my place. I always lose my place. So the correct opinion is that knowledge gained from a diffuse congruent report is equal to all those narrating it. So now all 30 are narrating about the summer storm, and the conditions must be a part of the narration. So there was thunder and lightning in the storm. This condition is now part of what was narrated in diffuse congruent. So those issues are also considered diffuse congruent. And the conditions must be a part of the narration, since it is possible that different narrators understood different things. If there are, if somebody said, let's say one person after it all ended said, and suddenly there was a rainbow. Okay, only one person said that. So I cannot say that what was diffusely congruent, what was mutawatir, is that there was a summer rainstorm, there was thunder and lightning, and there was a rainbow. Rather, there was a summer rainstorm, there was thunder and lightning, that part is mutawatir, وَتَفَرَّدَ بِهِ, and then only one person singularly said, and then there was a rainbow. So, you can understand when you come now to the hadith, it can get complicated. When you read in the catalog of the hadith, by the way, you will find this very frequently. Or, just earlier before I started recording, I was reading a series of stories narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma. That the Prophet ﷺ is narrating a story of something he experienced during the Isra and the Mi'raj, that he a beautiful scent came to him. So he said to Jibreel alayhi salam, "What's this scent?" And he said, "Oh, this is one of the children of Fir'aun," and narrated a beautiful story which I actually had never heard before, and I thought it was very, very beautiful. But she was a muwahhida, she believed in Allah Ta'ala. Fir'aun was upset, so he killed her and her children. It's a horrible ending, but then she has paradise, and that was what the beautiful smell was. Now, in the Musnad of Imam Ahmad, in which I found this tradition, there's like 6 or 7 hadith, right, that mention this. One of the narrations ends with Ibn Abbas saying there were 4 people who spoke in the cradle, and he mentions the child of this woman, because he was a child that was nursing, and the mother was scared that he was going to die, and the child spoke to the mother and said, "Mom, don't worry, the punishment of this world is less than the punishment of the hereafter." That last line, and Ibn Abbas said there are 4 people who spoke in the grave, like Christ, alayhi salam, etc. It's only in that one narration, in that sequence that I read, for example. But the rest of the hadith is narrated by multiple people. So when you read in the canon of the hadith, in the catalogs of the hadith, you're going to find that very, very frequently. So don't think that this is some kind of like odd, like nitpicking thing. It's very, very common. And you have to understand what part of the tradition is mutawatir versus what part is ahad. So the mutawatir part is the part that we're going to hold. But then there are different parts. And it gets a little bit more complicated, because then something could be mutawatir by its meaning, not in its specifics. So, is that example now? Well, let me mention it now, just in case we forget it. Like, we go back to that dinner party example, and let's say that the host of the dinner party gave everybody a gift, and then there are 3 or 4 things that are mentioned as gifts. Some people, a cluster of people, say he gave us a gift card to a restaurant. Other people say he gave us a mushaf. Other people say he gave us Zamzam from his recent Hajj trip. Now, there are 2 things that are happening. One thing is the macro issue of what the host gave us gifts. Everybody at the dinner party said that. That part is mutawatir. what the host gave in those different things, you can't say that it's mutawatir that he gave those individual things. But the whole story is mutawatir from the point of view of the host gave gifts to his guests. And again, that's another way that you'll find in the hadith literature that type of talk. Let me keep going because I feel like I'm stuck on this issue. And then he says, rahimahullah, وأن الإجماع على وفق خبر وبقاء خبر تتوفر الدواعي على إبطاله وافتراق العلماء بين مؤول ومحتج لا يدل على صدقه. Consensus, ijma' is based, and there'll be another section in ijma' when we finish this chapter, inshallah, so we'll talk about that in detail there. Consensus is based on matching the transmitted statement, not the exact statement itself. Similar to the example that I just gave, that part of it will be mutawatir and other parts might not be mutawatir, or that the consensus could have been formed because of an exterior condition. So consensus is based on matching the transmitted statement, not necessarily that statement itself. And the dominant opinion is that the existence of a text, while it is possible there are conditions that make it false, while there are conditions that make it false exist, it cannot be assumed to be sound. Because if there's something out there that can weaken the text, then you can't say that it's sound. And the dominant opinion is that that a text that exists amongst the ulama, some of who use it as proof and others who offer a metaphorical meaning, cannot be assumed to be sound, because there's no consensus on the meaning of the text. So we don't deny the text, but then there's a differences of opinion of, is this literal, for example, and I'm going to use it as a hujjah, or this is metaphoric, it means something else. So again, another layer of complexity to the tradition, to the analysis of our traditional text, or to the narrated text, afwan, is that how do the ulama use it? So for one item, it means one thing, literal, and I'm going to use it, which is the default. Usually, what we default to is the literal meaning. Or another set of ulama say, no, it's metaphoric. There's a ta'wil there. Well, if that's the case, then I can't say that that's a sound tradition universally, and that I glean from it everything that either party says. Okay, we'll pick up the discussion in the next and final clip, inshallah, bidnillah. All right. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. وأن المخبر بحضرة عدد التواتر ولم يكذبوه ولا حامل على سكوتهم أو بمسمع من النبي صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم ولا حامل على سكوته صادق. The dominant opinion is that a report of something actual in the presence of those who are the number of diffuse congruence and who do not deny or negate the statement can be assumed to be true. And the dominant opinion is that whoever was in a place to hear the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam in matters of religion or life, and the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam did not negate what he heard, can be assumed to be a true statement. So, the first example is that the dinner party example that I've been going with, I just made up on the fly. One person from the dinner party, the dinner party was Thursday night, so the next day is Friday, Jummah. All of the people are part of the same masjid community. One person from the dinner party informs the imam that last night we were at the dinner party and the host gave us all gifts. And then the rest of them, and this is in public, and then the rest in the masjid are all of the other, at least 20, 25 people from the 50 guests, and they don't say anything negative about what what that one person told the imam. That means that is mutawatir, because the nature of something mutawatir is that if it's something that we all observed, and we said that it's an impossibility that we would conspire to lie about it, also likewise, if somebody were to say something incorrect about that, one or more of those people will say, no, that's not what happened. So if somebody reports on something that happened in the presence of a number that is at the level of tawatur, which what we're saying here in these classes is like 5 or above, and those other people are silent, then that which is said is mutawatir. Now we take that and we we place that in the scenario of the Prophet ﷺ and the Sahaba. If the Prophet ﷺ is saying something, or if he observes a Sahabi saying something about the Prophet ﷺ, matters of the deen or even matters of the dunya, and the Prophet ﷺ does not correct him, that is a affirmation. That's how we begin this chapter or this book of Sunnah that we're discussing now. So therefore, that statement is true, because it's impossible that the Prophet ﷺ would hear something or observe something that was incorrect and not correct it, because that's part of his prophetic mission, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. I think that part is clear. Moving on. وأما نعم وأما من وأما مظنون الصدق فخبر الواحد وهو ما لم ينتهي إلى التواتر ومنه المستفيض وهو الشائع من أصل وقد يسمى مشهورا وأقله اثنان وقيل ما زاد على ثلاثة. So this is the end of section 1, and he says, as for statements that could have doubt, the opposite of all the things that we mentioned, there could be doubt. Not that there is doubt. I don't want you to, I might have mistranslated that elsewhere, and I'll try to make a point to correct myself. It's not that there is doubt in it, because when you say this text has doubt in it, then in English that sounds like, okay, then why should I trust it? We're saying it could have doubt, meaning that it has not reached the level of tawatur that is absolute, not it's yaqeen. What you understand from the absolute text is yaqeen. فَعْلَمْ أَنَّهُ لَا إِلَهَ إِلَّا اللَّهِ. Know that he is there's no God but Allah. You don't need to think about that. You understand what that means. It's mutawatir. It's under you know, it's a clear-cut thing. It's قطعي الدلالة وقطعية الثبوت وقطعية الدلالة. It's textual narration is absolute because it's through tawatur, and in that particular verse that I gave, we understand what it means. It means La ilaha illallah. There's nothing, it doesn't mean, we don't have to think about it. So the text that's below that could contain doubt because it's not at that level of certainty. So as for statements that could have doubt, they are singularly transmitted text, ahad, which is that which has not risen to the level of diffuse congruence, such as the mustafid, which is a type of hadith. We talked about that in the hadith class. What is popular amongst people, and some call it the mashhur. And when it comes to mustalah of the hadith, there's like a critical number of mustalah that you need to know, in my opinion. This is only the faqir's opinion. And then the rest of it is not as important because there's so many differences of opinion. So if you're like a super duper hadith expert, yeah, you're going to know all of those like nuances. But from the usul point of view, there's just the top tier level of hadith. And I'm not trying to be disparaging, by the way. I'm just saying from the point of view of Usul al Fiqh, it's like low, medium, and high. You just need to know which category is the hadith. If you're stuck in something and then you need to do the further investigation, you're going to go get the big books of mustalah, and then you're going to figure out the details because they could be consequential. But most of the time they're not, because the hadith have been serviced already. Al-Muhim, such as the mustafid, which what is popular amongst people and sometimes called mashhur. The least amount of narrators for this type, the ahad, are 2, and some say more than 3. So if we're saying that the mutawatir is 5 and above, then 4 and below is going to be ahad, basically. But there are differences of opinion. And the difference of nomenclature is how you know the differences of opinion. So the people that are really into mustalah hadith, they'll say, no, the hadith that's narrated by 1 and 2 is one word, the hadith that's narrated by 3 and 4 is another word, so on and so forth. So the point of view is that this is one step below the mutawatir hadith. So we have some time, so let's jump into issue number 2. So he says, rahimahullah, al-asahu أن خبر الواحد يفيد العلم بقرينة ويجب العمل به في الفتوى والشهادة إجماعا وفي باقي الأمور الدينية والدنيوية في الأصح سمعا قيل وعقلا. So he says, rahimahullah, the dominant opinion is that statements singularly transmitted, what we're talking about now, the ahad hadith, singularly transmitted, yield knowledge with associated things. Yani there has to be a qarina, there has to be something in addition to the ahad hadith that gives me the knowledge to act on it. The dominant opinion is that statements singularly transmitted yield knowledge with associated things. It is obligatory to act on these texts in matters of fatwa and testimony by consensus. So we have ijma' that in issues of court cases when there's testimony, the testimony is ahad narration, the testimony itself. So we take that as a proof, and also in fatwa. So we can build our fatwa case on a ahad tradition. In other matters of dunya and deen, of other worldly matters and religious matters, we take the ahad hadith in the dominant opinion. This has come to us through transmission, or some say the argument is based on a rational argument. So it doesn't necessarily matter how the argument is made, whether it's through naql, whether it's through transmission, or whether it's through al-aql, through reason. The bottom line is, the dominant opinion is we use the ahad hadith in matters of the dunya and the deen. When it comes to matters of aqeedah, the threshold is a little bit different. If it has to do with things related to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and top tier level things dealing with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. But if it's like a miracle of the Prophet, or if it's something that has to do with eschatology, one of the signs that medium or major signs that might come, those hadith can be ahad. There's nothing wrong with that, because it doesn't impact your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But you can't worship God and your whole worship is based on a series of ahad transmissions. That's not going to work. It has to be yaqeen, it has to be certain, because the point of aqeedah is to have certainty, not to have doubt. So when he says in matters of the deen, he's talking about matters of the sharia and specific matters of aqeedah, but the matters of the sharia and the matters of suluk. So all of our sulukiyat, all of the great books like the Ahya and Qut al-Qulub, Taib al-Makki, and so on and so forth, all the great books of suluk and tazkiyah, many of the hadith that talk about virtuous acts, pious acts, are hadith that are ahad. And actually many of them are weak hadith, da'if. But we use those type of hadith, especially the weak hadith we talked about, for fada'il al-amal, in actions that cause us to have good behavior and good things. We use the weak hadith because the end result is we're doing something that's good. So it's important that we know what we're using the hadith for, and that will help us understand. But as a default, as he said in issue number 2 here, we universally use the ahad hadith in matters of deen and dunya all the time, because that's a sort of natural, the way not everything is going to be an issue of tawatur. Okay, we'll pause here inshaAllah. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina wa maulana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sallim tasliman kathiran. Walhamdulillahi rabbil alameen. Alhamdulillah, in today's lecture we were able to complete issue 1 and issue 2. Issue 1, we began by talking about the mutawatir hadith, the hadith that is narrated through diffuse congruence, which is, as we are saying, based on the text, 5 and above. So if the hadith is narrated, or the incident is narrated or witnessed by 5 people or more, we call this a hadith mutawatir. And we said that the mutawatir hadith is a hadith that is or a narration that is dealt on things that are observable and natural. So not things that are rational, al-aqliyat. Those things are not considered in the area of mutawatir, because many people can agree on something that is intellectually or rationally incorrect. Unfortunately, it happens all the time. Here we are talking about things that were observed, and one of the examples I gave throughout the lesson, the lectures, was a dinner party in which a storm happened. Then we talked about the four is not enough for mutawatir, so but there's no exact number, so that's why I'm saying 5 and above. We said that Islam is not a condition for the narrator, or that they be in the same region or town, because things can be observed on a meta level, and that we said that the knowledge gained from the mutawatir hadith is necessary and absolute. And then we said that the narration that the knowledge that we gain from the narration, from the incident that's being narrated through tawatur, also is applied to its conditions that are directly related and also narrated by those people. So the example I gave is that there was a summer rainstorm and thunder and lightning. So thunder and lightning becomes an extra description. If everyone is saying that, then that is also part of the narration. But there can be other qualities or conditions or aspects of what is narrated, what was observed, that specific aspect is not mutawatir. And I think I gave the example that one of those people said there was a rainbow after the storm ended. If one person narrates about something that happened with a large group and no one denies what that person said, then that is also narrated, that is also a mutawatir hadith and a true statement. Likewise, similar situation with the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam. And then we said that any text that is narrated by four or less is considered an ahad, a unitary or singularly transmitted text that could contain some doubt. So it's not as strong. We use those texts now in issue number 2. We use those texts for fatwa and testimony, and we also use them in other aspects of the Sharia. Those are the main points that we talked about. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Mawlana Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam.